in living pretty much and knowing a whole variety of people is that I've come to just the grand conclusion that no matter how good, kind, the way that you make your life and everything, if you have a lot of money, you are automatically corrupted. Not corrupt person. You could be a good person, but you are subliminally corrupt because blood, money, money does affect you in a way that it makes comfortability, one, and two, sentimentality. And those two things create attachment, right? And the more things that you become attached with that are not of a righteous nature or not going to allow you the truth in giving it in a cheerful, loving willingness, you have a harder time getting the results or just being fulfilled, right? And so that's why having less, you can give more. And in having less, by giving more, the poor, what you think is poor, you find out that you have become the most wealthiest person because God will give you everything in a cheerful, loving way because you were willing in your faith to do that, right? And if you do have things and you don't, a lot of things and you want to give, and there is another way that you can give something of great, great value, probably the only valuable thing that you have to God without giving him anything else, just this in a cheerful, loving, willing way. And in return, he'll give you it in return. And that is time. Time to everybody is really the one and the most precious thing that is completely and utterly in your control and given only to you. And it's only limited and it's truly yours. If you give your time to somebody, you're giving them the availability of your animated life here in this reality, right? And so time is the one really valuable thing to you. And if you give God all your time in cheerful, loving willingness, God gives you all the time and more in cheerful, loving willingness. And by this is how you get everlasting life. It's a gift out of a completion of the love of God for you. And it's given to you cheerfully in a loving willingness because you have given all your time to him. And that is, everlasting life. And it's, and you can give him all of that. He gives you everything and more, right? So that was about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. What that really means in practice, and after practicing enough, the truth about it is that to do that and to know how to do that is to give everything in a cheerful, loving willingness with no expectation. So you have to do it correctly, yeah? And, And then the second one is love thy neighbor as thyself. So everyone knows about that, you want to treat others the way that you want to be treated. It's the golden rule and whatnot. Well, in practice, by knowing this, you have to know how to love yourself. If you don't have love, how can you give love to anybody, right? And if you have a screwed up sense of love, your love is going to come out screwed up in sense. You need to have a good role modelship for love, right? And so we learn that from our parents or from what we think is good people, and that's what we practice and we can give to the neighbors, but it doesn't cater to everybody. And after practicing this and then, becoming more mature, you realize that you do have a role model that is the perfect example of love that that was made for you to capably follow and be successful in it, right? And that is what Jesus Christ did. In knowing what he did, you learn to love deeper, bigger, better, bolder, and badder, almost like outside of the norm, right? To ultimately make yourself the better and best person you could ever be. And the greatest example of someone loving themselves and knowing how to love correctly in a great big way to love their neighbors, right, is Jesus. Because Jesus is love. Jesus is love as God is love, right? And Jesus loved you as he loved himself. And so love, yeah, and did it as me and you. He could empathize with us. And why I also was thinking about that, I also learned that why I know that Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Galilee or Judea, whatever, Jesus the man, he had to die on the cross as a man. And that is why he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so many people have got it wrong, and they're like, it's impossible for sin to be in the presence of God. Like, just to say something is impossible for God is for you to already not know God. Of course it's possible. It has always been the plan. That's why Jesus Christ did that. And that is why after obedience on that, he had holes in his hand and feet, but it was still the perfect blemished Lamb of God. But the blemish was perfect, you know. So sin was always meant to be, God can do everything. If he wanted to be impossible, he would make it impossible. A perfect example of that is your free will. He gave you free will. He could always break it through, but he made a promise and an oath not to do that, right? That's the only reason. So don't ever limit God, and don't ever get confused that to say that, oh, this is not possible and that's why this is so terrible. Not at all. So always know that God is going to be bigger than if ever you think not. It is not as well, but also know that it's also, yes, it's God. Anyway, the reason that he did that was because Jesus Christ died as a man, and he could not see God. He couldn't feel that hope. He couldn't feel the presence of his Father because he was a man about to die. And that's what happens right before you die. You lose all hope. You don't feel something there with you. And you're like, oh my gosh, why have you left me? And that's what I think happens when when you die and the spirit goes back to where it came from, because every breath that you have is your spirit, and that is one breath from God given to you as a gift, pretty much. So that's why every breath you should be thankful, which is a fun exercise. Anyway, and then 2, you feel it leave you, and you're stuck with your soul. Does that make sense? And so with your soul, that's what Jesus was saying, like, oh, why have you left me? He felt for the first time what we feel right when we die, and that's why he couldn't see his Father. So anyway, that's why. And then after that, of course, he was glorified. Hello, right? Because he was God and he was love. So that is the greatest example of knowing it, and knowing that he has perfect empathy with us to know the weaknesses that we have in this type of love, right? But he still followed through. And so if you can understand those two things, you'll then understand that loving your neighbor as yourself, love is the capacity and has the capacity to give everlasting force to anything and transform it to an eternal capability. So that means that you could love your neighbor as yourself. You could love yourself in an eternal capability, and therefore your neighbor, there's only peace. Does that make sense? Because love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, not rude, not proud, not self-seeking, keeps no record of wrong, rejoices in the truth, protects, trusts, loves, hopes, perseveres, and never fails. What, right? And if you do that, love your neighbor as yourself, and then love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, by giving everything, you have heaven on earth, pretty much. That's why those two roles are so important, and to understand it in a deeper level, that we are now able to understand it because of the times that we live in, and being the generation of technology and information, you understand that we are the generation of omniscience, pretty much. That's why it's hard to you can't fool anybody anymore, because they'll just jump on their Google and ask it, and then the answers will come there, and they'll be like, you're wrong, and everyone's really smart, but they don't know how to take it to heart. So they just it's something outside of themselves that is giving you that capability, which in the end, the way that we have been developing, if you think about it, we really don't need anything outside of ourselves, because we are really the most incredible put together anything in the universe. We have the capabilities of doing that. We just keep shirking those off and going the easy route to looking at things on the outside and thinking that we need those in order to have that capability, when it is all here because we are in the image of God. And if we can learn to love bigger, better, bolder, and wiser to that capacity, then you will see heaven on earth and you will see yourself transform. And when I say learn to love in capacity, remember, God's love is omni-eternal. Like, we can't understand the full force of this kind of love. That's why he gives it to us in steps, and he works with us in steps in order to become more like him, because he is love, right? And so if he came all at once, we'd be completely destroyed. It's not, we're too insignificant for such the greatest force in the omniverses. And so Jesus Christ, who is God, who is love, who came as a man, us, understood that, and then could understand a justified capacity that would make you have enough, filled with enough love as you are, to have the faith virtualization, and through that force love virtualization, which gives it the eternal capability, right? And that faith then sounds, and that's when you see Jesus. Your faith no longer is faith; it's fact. Like, and I say that out of personal testimony to what happened to me by doing this, and I got approved by, like, I was with Jesus Christ, holding his hand. He took me through everything, and even through that, I got confused after the fact, because I wasn't being. I didn't have a congregation I was going to. I don't go to church. The church goes with me, and so I would learn on the Spirit, by the Holy Spirit by myself, and develop it like that with no other influences. And in that being said, I was almost questioning whether or not I was tricked by the father of lies, because I wasn't judged. And no one's ever told me that there was a way that you could go to God and not be judged. And it wasn't only until after a while after that happened that through the Bible I learned about that part, and I was like, that's what happened. And so I know it was real, and because I had followed these things and developed in myself to the full knowledge of what they are capable of doing, and then actually taking the leap and fulfilling that justified capacity of faith that a man should be able to do comfortably with a little bit of struggle, but as gracefully as possible, that your faith is no longer faith. It's like a fact. Like, I don't have people like, oh yeah, you got to work on your faith, fulfill your faith. I'm like, I don't feel like I guess I should say that I don't feel like I have any faith. Like, it has turned something. It no longer is faith. It's something different. It's called by another name. The closest one I can think of is fact. Like, what faith is you truly believing in something that you don't see, you don't know yet, right? And you just go on in faith in the possibility that it could not be known, but you don't have any of that possibility. To those looking at you, you look crazy, because to them it looks like that possibility. But if the faith is in you developing, then you slowly get stronger and stronger in this, and then who knows, right? But when you have reached a capacity, it actually transforms your entire perspectives, and you get raptured. You get it in a blink of an eye, and you go somewhere else, and it's there, and you were there, and I was there for eternity, and I'm here now, and I got to experience so much, and see so much, and realize so much, and because of that, I just was approved. That's my approval, and that's why I have the right to be called a child of God from the kingdom of heaven. And so, yep, that's why I love those two most important rules, and that's what I wanted to share with everybody. Maybe that will help everybody, and maybe eventually help the world. And so, Thank you for listening. And remember, this is the day that the Lord